Before we start, there's something I have to say. This was a sad and difficult day for me personally. You might have heard of the news coming from Airbnb. When we moved to Silicon Valley, we moved for my role at Airbnb, my first job in Silicon Valley. And my experience at Airbnb was one of the most surreal, special, honestly unbelievable experiences I've had. So much of what I've learned and the ways in which I've grown, it all came from Airbnb, my time there, the wonderful people there. It's a very special place to me. And today, Airbnb had to lay off 25% of its workforce, many of whom were my colleagues and friends. And so I just want to say that my heart goes out to my air fam, as we call it, and honestly, everyone else who's been affected by this crazy situation we're in. I don't think we can sit as two psychologists and talk about stuff without acknowledging how insane and difficult and stressful this time can be. So thank you to everyone at Airbnb for everything you've done and for everything you're doing, and for all of my incredible friends and former colleagues from there, for everything you've taught me and given me. And I hope to give back. And if there's anything I can do for any of you, you know where to find me. So I just wanted to say that. And now let's move on to episode 13 of season 1 of UXR Conversations. And, you know, in some cultures and some religions, 13 is considered an unlucky number. But I feel incredibly lucky today to have Dr. Adi Zif Baltarisky on this show with me. She is the co-founder and chief behavioral officer of Kumbaya, her latest venture. We'll talk about that a bit later. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Noam, you're awesome. And my heart goes out to you about the situation. And I think you're very moving for saying that. And thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. We've been in touch for less than a year. I checked. We connected in August of 2019 when you messaged me initially, but it feels like we've known each other a lot longer. And we have a lot of commonalities, you and I. We both grew up in Israel. We went to the same school, college, undergrad. And by the way, the school we went to, the IDC Herzliya, they just got approval to grant PhDs in psychology.
I've seen that, and I think that is going to be an amazing, amazing program. I love that school. I think it's one of the most innovative schools that are out there. So yeah. I was very excited to see that.
Yeah, so congrats to them on that. And we both got our PhDs in psychology, and we both ended up here, and by here I mean in tech, and working on technology products. So we share a lot. And today we're going to talk about your journey, our journeys in psychology. And we're going to talk about the fact that we're both psychologists, and we had this path that we took from academia and from a clinical practice to tech. So if anyone has questions or comments about this stuff, please, as always, you can send us them by commenting on YouTube. Right now, we're broadcasting on YouTube only, and that might stay that way for now. And if you've been enjoying these conversations and you want to watch some more and attend more content, you can consider subscribing at youtube.com/c/Noam Segal. So we do share a few things, as I mentioned. I wanted to start with this. Growing up in Israel, both going to this, to the IDC, a private university in the center of Israel. What was your experience like there? Can you add some color so people kind of know what it's like to study at the IDC? Do you remember what it was like to be a student there?
It was fun. I can tell you that. It was one of the most fun periods in my life. I think the IDC is a great place. I learned a lot. I actually started in law and business. That was the beginning of my path there. I did 4 years of law and business. The atmosphere was great, very innovative. Growing up in Israel, I think, is very unique in general. It kind of prepares you for the real life. It gives you a different perspective. It builds resiliency, and I think it's definitely helpful. But IDC has a special place in my heart. I'm actually very involved still there. I was supposed to teach a class there when I lived in Israel, so it's a very unique place. I think there are a lot of very smart and innovative people coming from there. So, how was
And
your experience in the IDC?
I had a wonderful time. I've spoken about this before, but I met my wife at the IDC, so that was a big bonus. And I was also in the first cohort ever of psychology at the IDC. So this was a new program, new department. We were the trailblazers in this program. And that was both a risk, but also a huge opportunity. And I personally believe in trying kind of new things and taking those sorts of risks. And for me, it worked out very nicely. But it really depends, I think, on your personality and kind of what's important to you. So I can understand people not, choosing that direction. By the way, what were you thinking about doing with the business and law degree? Were you not considering psychology at the time, or what was the idea?
I was very, very, very young when I went to do this degree. I was 20, right after the army. My brother did this, and kind of was led to do that. Psychology was always there, but also technology. So I did the business in the IT major, and really enjoyed that part. Finished law and really pursue my PhD in clinical psychology in the US, because this was my real passion. But I did finish the law degree, and I think it gave me a lot. So I think it led me to where I am today. So everything is part of the journey. So
there you go.
I completely agree with it.
Now, the next choice we both made was to get a PhD in psychology, spend some time in academia. You chose to focus on the clinical side, whereas I chose to focus on social personality psychology, which is very much on the research end of things. Why did you choose to train as a clinical psychologist at the time? Did you know at that point you wanted to open a clinic and have people?
Definitely. So before I came to the US to do my PhD in clinical psychology, I wanted to know that I can actually treat people. And I went to volunteer in a mental hospital to kind of check the environment and see if it's something that I can take, and if it's something that I'm really interested in, discover that it is, and then to understand them, what motivates them, the pattern they have since they're young, and how it kind of unfolds as adults. I think it's a very special journey to be a therapist. The journey you take with clients, and it's always was very appealing to me. And I think it's an amazing profession. I gotta say, I always feel like very fortunate and humble that people allowed me to kind of go into their life and go through that with them. I learned a lot. I can tell you that. So it's definitely why I chose this.
The clinical side is incredibly challenging. I spent some time in psychiatric hospitals as well, specifically GER, which is a psychiatric hospital.
Oh, this is where I was. This was the 2 years that I volunteered. I loved it.
So I loved it too, and I also spent 2 years there. I spent one year in the closed ward for adults, and another year in the closed ward for teenagers and children.
That was my 2 years over there.
Wow, like we're the same person. We're just the same. We're the same.
Except you're younger. You're younger. You're younger than me.
a little bit. And what I felt there, well, first of all, there was a huge difference between the adult ward and the children's one. And I don't want to get into that too much because it's not the topic of today. But I think the biggest difference for me was that in the adult ward, there was something missing. And that thing that was missing was hope. I felt like there wasn't any hope there. They were going through this revolving door of coming back in, going back out, failing to adhere to their medicine protocol and their treatment protocol, coming back in again, and essentially living most of their lives within these closed wards without the support of family or friends. It's tough. It's definitely tough. So
I want to look at it as a different kind of hope, by the way. I think it's a different kind of hope. It's how you perceive hope also. Right. So there's the hope of the adolescence that it's a little bit different. It's hope around the future. And, and I think it's a different kind of hope that you have to recognize. That's what I discovered when working with adults. You have to recognize it, even if it's really hard, because it's our perception of how we see hope that sometimes affects that.
What do you think about the state of the user experience, the product in the health space? I feel like there's a lot of work to do there. Even if I'm asking just even as a consumer of health related technology, is that something you think about, having worked at hospitals and other clinical situations, things like how people are able to find therapy, get therapy, other types of treatment?
I think it's not developed enough. I think it's a space that is starting to grow, and you can see that. But I think I always tell psychologists that I think psychologists should be involved in that process. When I taught in the university, I would tell them, get out of the couch, go into tech. You're needed. It's a space that you have to know who you're building the product to. You have to know what kind of makes them tick, and what's the motivation, and what's the best, what will they react best, right? Because it's a changing world. So I think it's a space that still needs a lot of work, but I see that the space is starting to grow right now. It's a very interesting space. It will be very interesting to see how it will unfold, whether it's the online therapy world, whether it's all those telehealth companies that are emerging, and especially in the COVID-19, right, where we have no choice, and mental health is deteriorating at this time, and people need help. So I think it will develop much more in the next few years. It's an interesting space.
By the way, I was just thinking, because you mentioned it, we are spending a lot of time on couches right now because we're all stuck at home. There's a global pandemic. We're all watching Netflix. And the number one experts on couches are clinical psychologists. Do you have any recommendation to people for like, what's the best, the best couch to watch Netflix on? Is that something you also... Because you know a lot about a lot of stuff, so maybe that's another type of expertise.
Yeah, sure. I can send you links to very comfortable couches. I'll send some link afterwards.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes for people.
Yeah, switch couches. That's my advice. Switch couches all the time.
Okay. Let's get back on track here.
Let's get back on track.
In the past few years, before you co-founded Kumbaya, and we'll get to that, you were doing something I've never really encountered before. You combined a clinical practice with product consulting. And I wonder how that even happened and what drew you to slowly, or maybe not slowly, get into the product side and kind of go, work less on the clinical side with patients. What happened there?
I want to say it was by mistake, but nothing is. So first of all, I live in the Bay Area, and it's contagious. You want to work, you somehow want to be involved in tech. I always felt like the outsider, right? What do? I'm a psychologist. What do you mean? It can't be. So, which was nice because I was unique, but I didn't want to be. So I was always very, very techy in general. Preferred the iPhone over diamonds. That was my style. So I finished my PhD and opened a private practice. And parallel to that, I opened a consulting business to tech companies. So I did executive coaching, culture, vision, mission. And one day I met, I don't know if it's by mistake, but it was fate. I met the CEO of an AI lab. And the lab name is Megagon Lab. I don't know if you know it. It's an AI lab. He's one of the best people I know. And he was extremely interested in positive psychology and technology, and really was passionate about building a product that will increase well-being and help people understand themselves more, understand emotions, understand actions, all kinds of things related to that. And we connected, and we actually started building as a product manager there with an amazing team. And we built this awesome product for Gen Z students. We did a lot of research in the universities. We wrote an article about human-computing interaction and built a product named Joe the Smart Journal. It's basically a well-being and it's a well-being product that helps you basically provide you insight of your daily experiences using NLP and all kinds of machine learning technologies, and enable with natural language processing, and basically helps you make good decision for yourself according to what you choose, right? Like you choose some values that you want to adhere to, and the product basically helps you get there, gives you advice, measure it kind of tells you how aligned your actions are with your values. It was an extremely, extremely interesting process. I learned everything I know about consumer behavior, took a lot of trainings, did a lot of user interviews, saw where my challenges and my gaps are, right? I wasn't technical. So there was some kind of a gap between, being a product manager and not knowing a lot about uh, um, the engineering work. So I definitely had like a boot camp in that, learned a little bit machine learning, got into their world, learned how to make that more aligned. So it was a very interesting, and everything I learned a lot. I did that for 2.5 years, 3 years, before I
Amazing.
did Kumbaya. So this is how I got to that. And my passion is in product. I discovered my true passion. It's bringing everything I learned and with my skills together and my passion and in one place. This is how I feel about it.
So I want to talk about that, because a big part of this conversation is highlighting the experiences of being a psychologist working on technology products. And, what is it that we learn within the realm of psychology? What is it about our training which enables us to do this type of work? What strengths do we have? And also, what challenges do we face when it comes to our work? So what is it exactly, if you could kind of crystallize what you learned in your years as a practicing psychologist, which translated to product work?
I think our biggest advantage is that we know people, and our biggest disadvantage is that we know people. So I see it as a advantage and a disadvantage. No, it's you have the advantage of knowing how to read a situation. You're very attuned to the customer's needs, which is part of a challenge of also being a founder, right? You can shift to want to research things, and sometimes as a founder, it's you have to put all kinds of hats. So I think that's part of my challenge. I think in the previous role of product manager, when I used to work in the AI lab, it was my gap in technical knowledge. So coming into this world, it can be scary for psychologists, because they say, "What do you mean tech? I'm not coming from that world." So it can be a misinformation that they have in coming into that world, and they actually have a huge advantage. How can you build the product without a psychologist? This is how I kind of think about it. Without someone who knows the consumer, without someone who knows what will help them use your product more and how they use your product, what motivates them, what's their inner point that makes them use a product. I truly believe today that even if it's in a consulting mode, there need to be some insights from someone who knows people and has been for years in behavioral health and know the consumer and think about the consumer from a different perspective. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I would also add that in terms of the training we get in the companies I've worked at, and I'll be doing a video on this because this is something I find very interesting. I've worked in companies where we were generalists as researchers. And by generalists, I mean, in particular, doing both quantitative and qualitative research. I think that of all professions, psychologists have a relatively balanced training when it comes to the quantitative and qualitative side, at least in the PhD programs or master's programs that focus on research and research methods. So I think that's another advantage of psychology. And I got a lot of great training in terms of research methods and statistics through that program. So I think that that's another thing that maybe you didn't mention as much, but I definitely agree with what you talked about. And I'm still kind of taken aback to this day when people ask me, and they ask me this all the time, what is a psychologist doing in tech? Like, wait, you're a psychologist and you work in tech? What is it that you do exactly? And it just never ceases to surprise me, I guess, that question coming from people. It seems so obvious, and yet clearly to many people it isn't. So
I think we're not going to
who
have
knows?
that problem in 10 years now. I really think they're starting to, at least in the Bay Area, they get it. They start getting it, and you see more psychologists being hired to all kinds of roles, and even the big companies, Facebook and Google, and it's starting to be even in the mid-sized companies. You see that the movement is starting. This is how I view it.
I would
and
agree.
I'm glad. I'm happy. I'm happy about it.
I would agree. So tell us about your latest venture, Kumbaya. You've already been on quite a journey with this startup, haven't you? Can you share bits about
Is there
that
a
journey?
startup that is not a journey? I'm not sure about that.
That's true. But I think you started fairly recently, and you've been through kind of, I think, a bit of a
Correct.
pivot maybe, and some kind of major shifts. So, well, tell us a bit about what it is first of all, and what you have been doing as Chief Behavioral Officer.
Chief Behavioral Officer. So we're a startup. We started a year ago. I'm leading the product. We have the CEO, Chen Levanon, and we have a team of 5. They are amazing. What we're doing is we're creating a communal marketplace for teens to find gigs, opportunities to earn, to save, to learn about their financial world early on in their life. On the other hand, we have parents that really needs help, especially now with the COVID-19, who hire teens for both virtual and non-virtual tasks, such as tutoring, childcare, pet care, and more household tasks. For parents, of course, it's cheaper, it's more safe, it's a trusted marketplace, and the connection that kids make with teens is quite amazing. So that of how it's benefiting the parents to hire a team. We started a year ago. We kind of tested the market. We did an MVP. We did a lot of research. I remember this is when I started talking to you, and you really, really helped me in all kinds of methods of how to implement that. And it's been quite a journey. We discovered a lot, listened to our user. We were very attached to the problem, less attached to the solution. And this is what happened. We kind of pivoted, and we launched our product on the day that the shelter in place was announced. And within 2 days made everything, very easy for virtual services. And it's going really great. Teens are, super happy they have so much free time. They want to they want to work. They want to make extra money. They have the time for it. Parents need help. So we kind of, we're very, I think it's a service that's really helpful for the community right now. We launched earlier than expected because we kind of felt like we have to do that to help. But in terms of, how we approach the UX and all that, it's been quite amazing. I think we discovered so much. It's so important to do that and to invest in that, in those methods and with interviews, and you discover so much. And I think one of the biggest problems that you have is that you're in love with your product. You do your product and you're in love with it, and you're having a hard time listening to the users, and you learn it the hard way. And I think it's when you let that go and you understand that the users are your best and your customers are your best source of information, and you know how to get the quality information from them by asking the right questions in the right setting, by the way. And you taught me that. You taught me how the setting is so important when you do that. So I think we benefited a lot from that. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad I taught you something. It's interesting. Like, do you feel like there's some sort of, maybe tension is the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway, tension between the way a clinical psychologist should and does work and the way a technology founder and product person works? You talk about being in love with your product and how hard it is to kind of disconnect from that. I am not a clinical psychologist, but I imagine that as a psychologist, you have to be empathetic, and also maybe, not impose your own feelings and emotions on your client as well, to some extent. I don't even know what I'm saying. How does the experience?
No, you are completely right.
how does the experience compare, I guess? And is there a tension there? Did you have to kind of rewire your brain to work on this product that you love so much versus working with clients in a clinical psychology setting?
I've never thought about this. I've never thought about this question before, but I think it's a really interesting question. But I think as a psychologist, you always have a parallel process, which I think comes in very handy when you work on products as well.
Yeah.
You are very aware of what you do and how you feel and why you do it. So I think it actually comes in very handy in for you to not follow your emotions all the time, for you to kind of be aware of why you feel what you feel, and kind of, balance yourself and be an observer of your own process, which I think comes in very handy for me, at least, in this process. I don't know if it's answering your questions, but this is how I
No,
feel.
definitely.
I feel that it's actually very helpful in solving this tension. But there is a tension between being a founder, being a product. There, in all those roles and all those hats that you put, that there is definitely a tension in general. You have to prioritize. You have to compromise sometimes when you want things to be perfect, and you want to, just a second, I need to test this. Let's do this before we. Sometimes we can't, and that is devastating sometimes. But I think that's the price you pay when you are also a founder. But it's fine. I'm happy with it.
Oh, totally.
I love it.
So I've been doing these UXR conversations for like a month now. This is episode 13. Every single episode, I have a loyal viewer who always asks a question, and she has a question for you now as well. So thank you, Tiana. This is amazing. Keep it going. Keep the questions coming. Her question is, hi, Adi. Thanks for sharing. I want to ask, as a clinical psychologist entering tech, what are some of the stereotypes that you've encountered, and how does that work or not for your career? By the way, being a clinical psychologist was also my dream career before, so I'm really glad to hear your conversation here. So, well, first of all, it's awesome to.
It's not too late. I would just want to say it. It's not too late. I'll start by saying that.
There you go. What do you think about? So, have you encountered stereotypes around being a clinical psychologist? Is that a thing? Have you encountered other stereotypes that are relevant?
I think at least now it's a little bit different because I don't work for some. So I think in terms of the when more around technical stuff that they are sure I will, psychologists will not understand, right? So the assumption is like, the behavioral aspect, it's your expertise. But I think that is the only thing. I was very fortunate. The company I worked for, they really allowed me so much freedom and exploring who I want to be and get training on what I think is I'm less strong in. And I think admitting what we're less, good at doesn't mean we can't be good at it. So we can always learn. So I think the experience, I came very open, and I knew that I don't know a lot of things. So I don't think I felt this way, those stereotypes. Of course, you have, oh, you're being a psychologist. And I think my partner, Chen, would agree, because I psychoanalyze the situation a lot and all the time. And I think the stereotype of a psychologist doesn't come only in tech, they come all the time. So it's something that you're kind of used to, right? My husband will tell me sometimes that I'm being a psychologist. So, it's something you kind of get used to. I didn't see it in a very intense way when I came to tech. But I want to emphasize that I was the only psychologist on the team. So I didn't, I didn't feel that. They were so accepting and amazing. I really had an amazing team there. And now I have, it's either I didn't perceive it this way or it didn't happen. One of the two.
By the way, you've mentioned this like technical thing a few times now, and my initial thought on that is, are there not enough people who understand the technical thing and that's their role? And maybe it's absolutely okay if some of us focus on the non-technical human aspects of the experience. That's exactly what we do, right? I do not. I to this day, although I'm a technical person and I'm interested in that stuff, I do not understand many of the technicalities of the companies I work for and what's going on behind the scenes. I'm very interested in it, but I'm not an engineer. I'm not even close. I have very little understanding of many of the things happening in the background, but that's okay. We understand people to a much deeper extent,
Correct.
and I think that's something that needs to be said, because there are definitely areas of growth where I wish to grow, and I think it would be beneficial for my job. There are areas where I'm weak, but I have no desire to grow in, and I think, like, I'm not sure. I'd say that I don't have any desire to grow on the technical aspect side, but not on certain technical aspects, if that makes
No, I
sense. So
understand.
anyway,
It
yeah,
does. I think I understand as a founder now. I understand much more in technical than I did before. I can tell you that. Yeah,
yeah,
a lot of knowledge about that I didn't have before. But I agree with you. I agree with you. It's knowing your strength and go with it, and working in a company as a psychologist, a tech company. It's an amazing experience, and I highly recommend it. I tell psychologists, get out of the couches. It's time. This is the future. We need to affect it. Like, this is what we need to do. Don't be afraid, right? We're needed,
totally.
definitely.
We've kind of talked about some introspection moments here. I think you have to be good at introspection to be a psychologist. I think you have to understand yourself deeply before you can help others. Um, so I do want to ask you what you've learned about yourself in this whole journey. What have you discovered about yourself
That's
as
such a good question.
now a co-founder, an entrepreneur, someone deeply involved in tech? What have you discovered about yourself that you didn't know a few years ago?
So much. So I discover it every day. It's like every day it's something new that I discover. I think I discovered that I bounce back really, really good from disappointment and points of failure, because in this process you do feel failure
A
a
lot,
lot,
absolutely.
a
Yeah.
lot. So I bounce back well. I know what I need to do to bounce back well. It's okay to also experience it, by the way. I'm not ignoring it. I understand what I'm going through, but my ability to bounce back is improving every time. Uh, I think I learned how important it is to also celebrate the good moments, which I think we don't do as much as I want to. But at the beginning, I remember I told Chen, every Friday we're sitting for an hour and we say only the positive things that happened this week. So it's so important. It's not an easy journey. You have to reinvent yourself every day. You have to be creative every day, which I love. It's something that I also love, right? But you need a lot of strength. You need to be very resilient. I discovered that I'm more resilient than I thought I am. You discover something new every day. This is what I love about it, right? I thought I knew everything, but about myself. I mean, I thought I was pretty, aware, but I
Yeah.
become aware every day. So it's kind of a good thing to have.
I have one last thing I want to ask. I ask this of many people. Who belongs in this profession? And by this profession, I'm thinking more of kind of UX research, or maybe UX more broadly. How do you think about belonging in the context of user research? We are both psychologists. Many people in UX research are not psychologists. They come from a variety of backgrounds. When you think about this question of who belongs in this profession and why, what would you say?
It's a really interesting question. Um, in terms of a psychologist or a non-psychologist, or just in general, who belongs
Just
to
in
this?
just in general.
I think people who really want to understand what, and I'm talking about humans, not users, right? People that are really, really curious and interested in the human behavior, and discover what motivates people and what helps people tick, and why do people make choices, and to know how to be curious about it. Um, I think can be very valuable in this profession. It's there's UX research, UX designer. There are all kinds of aspect in UX, but I definitely think that you need to be a very curious person, and you need to have for humans, for human
Yeah.
behavior, and when you talk about tech, so consumer behavior, right? But first of all,
Yeah.
humans. What do you think? I'm interested in your answer.
I'm going to give a talk about this later on in June in a conference. But one of my thoughts
Interesting.
about this, one of my thoughts about this is that people, humans, to your point, are so multifaceted, so complex. You understand a bit of that complexity when you study something like psychology, but there's just so much there.
I agree.
And so my general thought is that modern UX research teams, modern product teams, to succeed, will need a very diverse group of researchers and designers who come from a multitude of backgrounds. And hopefully those different backgrounds take varied approaches to understanding people, and together can come up with something which is, relatively holistic.
I
I
like your
think,
approach.
yeah, I think this is going to be quite crucial to the success of product, because humans are indeed incredibly complex, and the products we're building are also becoming, increasingly complex, and it's really challenging. To your point, it's challenging to build these companies, build these products, understand people to the extent you need to. So I really do hope that anyone
Yep.
who is curious about people and coming at it from whatever angle it is, joins the party and the
I agree.
profession. Yeah,
I agree.
it's important.
It's just like patience, right? I don't think one psychologist can is the only cure to a patient, right? So you need a system around that. You need support from family. You need all kinds of stuff to make that product, which is a human, kind of thrive. So
Yeah,
we don't need just one aspect. So it's
yeah.
only makes sense. I agree with you.
So
Interesting. I'll
before,
come to your lecture in June.
please do. It's going to be remote, so it's very easy to do that, because there are no in-person conferences right now. So I always like to ask before we end, where can people reach you? What should people reach out for? I wonder if you're hiring at this point or doing something else. What do you like to be contacted about, and where can people reach you if they need to?
First of all, you can always go to our website, mykumbaya.com, and you can reach me in my email at d@mykumbaya.com. Feel free to reach out for any questions. If you're a parent of a teen that is looking to make extra money in a safe platform, or if you're parents that need help, I would love
Sign
to help
up.
you, and sign up and talk to me directly if you have any questions. We're coming up with a new version today, actually. It's already in the process. So Noam, I had so much fun, and please contact me with any questions. I always like to answer questions, so hopefully it was helpful.
Awesome. I had a lot of fun as well. We talk a lot, but this was special to me. So thanks again for coming
To me
on.
as well.
And again, if you want to have a UXR conversation as well, or if you need anything and want to get in touch, I'm always at noamseg@gmail.com or at noamseg on the Twitter. I spend a lot of time on Twitter arguing with people, saying things I regret, putting up funny pictures and memes and stuff. It's all over the place. But what else are you going to do in the evening when you are stuck on the couch? But do get off the couches, to Adi's point. Like, get off the couch, go speak to some people, start amazing
Definitely.
companies.
Network.
There you go.
Do all that.
Well, have a good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining. I
Yep.
hope you join
Thank you.
again. Bye for now.
Bye.